Hello and welcome. This tutorial is all about pivot tables. If you have ever struggled with organizing and analyzing large sets of data, pivot tables are your best friend. In this tutorial, we will discuss what's a pivot table, what are its uses, then how it helps you in data analysis. By the end of this tutorial, you will know how to create a pivot table, customize it, and use it for powerful data analysis. Come, let's get started. For this tutorial, I'm using a sales dataset that I downloaded from Kaggle. Here you can see we have the details of purchases that's made by different customers. We have the details like customer ID, age, gender, item purchased, etc. etc. There are 19 columns, so I think it's better to save my time by saying etc. etc. This dataset contains the details of 3900 purchases. In data analysis, you often have to deal with large amount of data, maybe even larger than this one. There comes the pivot tables. Pivot tables allow you to quickly summarize large data sets by grouping, filtering, and aggregating data. Suppose you want to calculate which category generates more profit or which age group makes more purchases. You can use pivot tables for all these calculations. Let's start with our first pivot table. Just go to Insert tab and click on Pivot Table. I'm using Microsoft Excel. If you're using Google Sheets, you can find it under the Data tab. At first, we should select our data range. By default, it will select the entire sheet. Sometimes we may not need the entire sheet for analysis. In such a situation, just highlight the data that you want. Also, we should choose where to place our pivot table. We got two options, new worksheet or an existing worksheet. I prefer to put it in a new worksheet. And finally, click the OK button. On the right hand side, you will see a pivot table editor. It has options like filters, columns, rows, and values. Rows are basically the categories to group by. Suppose you want to add some subcategories. There comes columns. Values are the data that you are summarizing. And finally, we have filters. If you want to narrow down our data, we can use filters. Suppose I have a question like how many items are purchased among different gender groups? Also, I want to compare the purchase across different categories of products. Drag and drop gender to the row shelf and category to the column shelf. Then drag category into values to see the count of products sold under each category. This is how our first pivot table looks like. This pivot table can give you answers for many questions like how many footwears are purchased among male customers or which gender group purchased most number of outwears, etc. Under the Insert tab, you can see an option Recommended Pivot Table. Excel offers recommended pivot tables to help users create pivot tables quickly and efficiently, especially if they are unfamiliar with the process. This feature analyzes your dataset and suggests suitable pivot table layouts based on your data patterns. Let's create a summary of preferred payment methods among different gender groups. For this pivot table, we just need two fields, gender and payment method. From this pivot table, we can say most of the customers, let it be male or female, prefer to use credit card for their purchase. 223 female customers as well as 473 male customers prefer to choose credit card for their purchase. The least preferred method among female customers is cash, and the least preferred method among male customers is debit card. Pivot tables can answer a lot of questions. For example, if you want to find out which location is the most profitable one, Pivot table can give you a summary of purchases based on different locations. This pivot table is much more complex than our previous ones. To find out most profitable locations, we can either sort the results or we can use conditional formatting. At first, select the column that you want to use for the conditional formatting. I'm using the grand total column and I'm highlighting the rows that has value greater than 5000. Now we can find out the locations with less number of purchases. I'm highlighting those rows with a different color. I feel like highlighting a location with most number of purchases with red is somewhat contradictory. So I used green instead. So far, we learned how to create a pivot table. Now we can see how to make it look much more attractive. Under the design tab, you can see different layouts. Choose one that you like. If you want to calculate subtotals or grand totals, there's an option for that too. In our Excel sheet, there is a column discount applied. I'm a little bit curious to know who is interested in discounts, men or women. But to my surprise, none of the female customers were interested in discounts. I don't know why it is so. To confirm it, I just filtered only the female customers. At this point, I was curious like, if I make any changes in my Excel sheet, will it get reflected in my pivot table? So I made changes in two rows. Now I have two female customers who applied discounts. Under the pivot table analyze tab, you can find a refresh button. Click on the refresh button. You can see the change is reflected in my pivot table. Earlier, you may have noticed values in pivot table. In pivot tables, the values area is where you perform calculations on your data. For numerical data, the default option will be sum. And for non-numerical data, the default option is going to be count. When I right clicked on sum of purchases, I could see an option field settings. And after selecting field settings, I got this pop-up window. Here you can see an option summarized by. This option controls how the data in the value field is aggregated. We can choose count, average, max, or mean, etc. You may just play around with all the options. Under the Data tab, there is an option to sort the data in our pivot table. Sorting helps you to arrange your data in a logical order, such as alphabetical or numerical. Sorting allows you to quickly identify trends and patterns in your data. By sorting data, you can easily locate specific items such as the most profitable location or least profitable location, etc. Under the Insert tab, you can see a feature called Slicers. It's a very helpful feature, especially when you're working with pivot tables. Slicers provide a very user friendly visual interface for filtering data. Slicers allow users to dynamically filter and analyze data in real time without modifying the source. Thanks for watching. If you found this tutorial helpful, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos. Thanks again for watching this video. I will see you in next one.